Whew, allergies. I am suffering from seasonal allergies. I knew I was going to feel it today. It was so nice outside. I'm recording this on May 4th. It was so nice and breezy and cool outside. It's like 70 something degrees on the 3rd, and it was stuffy in my house and a little warm. And so I opened the windows because no way I was turning the AC on for that, but I knew I was going to suffer for it. Pollen is just so high. Anyway, hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, we review books. I am going back into the review archives with this review, and I am going to review a book, as you can tell by the title, that I don't see a whole lot making the rounds on Instagram and YouTube. I don't have TikTok, so I definitely know this book is not on TikTok. Okay? So, let's jump right into it. I keep smacking my lips, sorry. I've been talking for an hour at this point almost, and my allergies are just drainage. The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne by Brian Moore. This book, I believe, takes place in Dublin. It takes place in Dublin. I can't remember if he's Canadian of Irish descent or if he is from across the pond. Okay. Let's hop into this book because this book, it's a short volume, a slim volume, but this book is so bleak. If you like a bleak novel, this is for you. But let's get into this. I have not revisited this book since 2021, which is when I read it. It was so much easier to go back now. Going forward was so frightening. Why did I pick this book up? Because it's not a book I really hear anybody talking about. It was the cover that caught my eye. If you look closely, there's a woman with her head down. She's almost camouflaged in to this floral motif, and clearly she's miserable. It's the cover that caught my eye. And she's miserable. She's in despair. And then the title hits you, The Lonely Passion. So yeah, we've got lonely woman narrative here. And I like a bleak novel. It's a bleak novel. This one, good grief. This book hits different. It hits. We're going to get into why. So, Judith Hearne is a single woman, I believe living in Dublin in her 40s. I want to say it's Dublin. She's definitely living in a city, and it's Dublin. It's Dublin. She does come from a well-to-do family, but she's come down in the world. She lives alone. She's barely making ends meet, and she's holding on to the hope that she's still to get married and have a family of her own. Judith's struggle with loneliness has driven her to rely on something that she wishes to keep as a secret. So this book also reminded me of Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. Maybe I should do a quick book review video on Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. So good. Because that's also about a single woman living in the 1950s, though that one has a little bit more hope to it. There's no hope in this book. Spoiler alert. And it relies on these interesting interactions that they have as single women in the mid 20th century. Excellent Women takes place in England, however. I believe that book takes place in London. Both of these narratives, but in different ways, relies on the interesting interactions that these women have, or Judith has, that to make their lives seem more interesting than they actually are. For it was important to have things to tell which interested your friends, and Miss Hearne had always been able to find interesting happenings where other people would find only dullness. It was, she often felt, a gift, which was one of the greatest rewards of a solitary life. So this book actually initially starts off feeling rather cheery, which is deceptive. However, Judith Hearne, I'm going to just call her Judith. Why am I saying Hearne? Judith is really attempting to cope with the reality that she's putting a Band-Aid over a wound. Where Excellent Woman is humorous, witty, and satirical, this book is gritty and despairing. Judith's loneliness is the type that has developed over years and years of hoping and not seeing. The way that she even interacts with herself reveals now at the point of this narrative, in which we're meeting Judith, is that she's hopeful, but that hope is hanging on by a thread. It's fragile. It's dwindled. She washed the glass, a plain woman, changing all to the beautiful illusion of beauty. There was still time, for her ugliness was destined to bloom late, hidden first by the unformed gawkiness of youth, budding plainness of young womanhood, and now flowing to slow maturity in her early 40s. It still awaited the subtle garishness which, when arrived at, would preclude all efforts at the mirror game. So, this relationship that Judith has with her own image and this hope that she's going to blossom into this beautiful younger woman, or more desirable woman, is an illusion. And it parallels this illusion that she's going to get married at this point for her. You can tell by the way that Moore writes this novel that it's not going to happen for Judith. It's not a spoiler. It's not going to happen for her. You can tell by the way he writes it that you open the book and very quickly on, you're like, oh, she's not going to get her heart's desire. The narrative becomes more desolate as Judith's resentment begins to seep through. She has spent her whole life under the care of her aunt, and then caring for her aunt has set her back in life. It's attributed to her lack of suitors. Her aunt was her priority. And so one could even argue that her aunt sabotaged her chances for marriage. And so Judith is bitter. She's like, if I didn't have to do this X, Y, and Z, maybe I could have been out there more in the world. Maybe I would have been more visible. And she's just looking back and saying, it's almost like she was set up to fail. She was set up to not get what she really wanted. Oh, he wasn't good enough for you. Oh, and also memories coming back to me. Her aunt, yes, her aunt did sabotage her in some ways. Oh, he wasn't good enough for you. No one's good enough for you. No one ever was, and no one ever will be. And it's all your fault that I'm here where I am today, even insulted by some fat old landlady and living in furnished rooms. So she was told that that these men weren't good enough for her in the past, suitors in the past. Maybe it was also because of her station in life, having been born into a wealthy family. So during this book, the thing that kept, there was a proverb that kept running through my mind as I read this book. Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when a desire is fulfilled, it is a tree of life. When you have a desire in life, time can become an enemy, as if it's taking longer for what you want to come to fruition. Again, for Judith, it's marriage. It's having a family. And she has held on, but she's in her 40s at this point. The likelihood of her having children, nature's going to take care of that for her. That doesn't mean that she still can't get married though, right? Some people get married later in life and they can't have children. Okay. But she knows that this is just not going to happen for her. That's why it says hope deferred makes the heart sick. Just now I'm thinking about Hannah in the Bible, in the Old Testament, how she wanted a child so badly that somebody thought that, I forgot who it was. The name evades me. Somebody thought she was crazy. She pleaded and she prayed so hard, God, give me a child, give me a child, give me a child, that somebody thought she was drunk. Hannah did have a child eventually, but she wrestled with that thing. I even heard a woman say, this was a YouTube video, side note. There's a woman that I was listening to, and she was saying how sometimes when you want something, you have a desire for something so badly, and it's taking longer to be fulfilled in your life than what you anticipated. Even though from the outside looking in, everything else in your life looks like it's okay, but there's that one thing that you really desire, and it just is taking longer to happen than you thought it would. No one can understand that inner turmoil, inner frustration but you. No one can understand that tension but you. So that is real. So that's why this book in particular hits different, because Moore gets at that. So Judith is a Catholic woman, and her faith means everything to her. However, the longer that her desires go unfulfilled, the more difficult it becomes to her. It becomes to remain faithful, to remain hopeful. There is this constant tension between maintaining faith and being on the verge of falling into complete and utter discouragement and disappointment. I was even reminded, I don't mean to be preaching, y'all, but get an organ. I was even reminded of one of the opening lines in my favorite movie of all time, which is It's a Wonderful Life. It opens with, you have these three heavenly beings. One of them is God. Two of them are angels, talking about George. And I'm quoting, what, is he sick? No, worse. He's discouraged. And the movie opens with this chorus of people praying for George Bailey, because George is at the end of his rope. George also has desires that were never fulfilled. Well, actually, up until this point, they were never fulfilled. This, of course, It's a Wonderful Life. It ends on a high note that he's going to get. I'm not going to spoil the movie if you've never had it, but it's this chorus of people who love George, people he didn't even know loved him, praying for him. And those prayers are going up to heaven. And these angels are talking with God and they're saying, is he sick? No, worse. He's discouraged, because discouragement is heavy. It is a burden. And as you can tell, I'm like really getting worked up. And if you listen to the beginning of the movie, there is "O Come All Ye Faithful" actually playing in the background, the Christmas song, "O Come All Ye Faithful." It is deep, you guys, It is deep. But yes, discouragement, lack of faith, loss of hope, it will wear a person down. And in George, it has caused him to go to the end of his rope. But just at the last moment, he is pulled out, because George was loved more than he realized that he was loved, even if it was one person. But with Judith, unfortunately, Judith doesn't even have that. But she is so discouraged, she's at the brink. She is at this. When a person is on that precipice of just giving up and leading entirely into discouragement, that is a horrible place to be in mentally, because at that point, what's left, right? What's left? It would be interesting to compare this novel actually to It's a Wonderful Life, because George had a backing. George had people in his life, and Judith has no one. Why should life be so hard for me? Why am I alone? Why did I yield to the temptation to drink? Why has it all happened like this? Oh, Sacred Heart, lighten my cross. You know the things I wanted, the home, the children, to raise up to honor and reverence you. Oh, sweet Jesus, you have shared my suffering. You know that I love you. Please, dear Lord, give me a sign, give me strength. This is not a preachy book at all, but you have this woman who is just, but it does go to show when she is at that precipice, she still has something that she can rely on, even when she feels like just hope is falling apart, everything's shattered. She has her faith to rely on. She still prays for herself when she has no one to pray for her. So when she's at her breaking point, her faith continues to crumble, though. She goes to a priest seeking encouragement, but she's let down and begins to see him as a fallible human being. An ignorant man, God's anointed with God's guidance. He should have known it was important, perhaps the most important confession of my life, but he didn't see that. And if he didn't see, why didn't you tell him, oh, Sacred Heart? You didn't guide him, help him to help me. Why? That's why this book hits different, because this is real. I am not Catholic, but man, when you're a person of faith and other people of faith don't step in for you and share your burdens, because that's what you're called to do, to carry one another's burdens, whether that's to pray for someone, whether it's just to listen and be compassionate or empathetic, when you don't even have that from the people who are supposed to do it in the first place, because I thought we believed the same thing. That's the cherry on top. Anyway, I need to reread this book because I'm getting hype. This makes me wonder, how do we know, again, this is what I wrote in 2021. Clearly I was feeling something. So this is what to start to conclude. This made me wonder, how do we know if we aren't someone's last resort when it comes to their time of need? How do we know that if we don't show compassion in that time, we could be the difference between someone giving up and someone holding on just a bit longer because you don't know what's on the other side? Just like with George. This is the difference between George Bailey and Judith Hearne. I was not expecting to do a compare and contrast between It's a Wonderful Life and The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne. George was at the end of his rope. He was ready to commit. He was ready to jump off the bridge. But while he was at his lowest, he didn't know that there was this chorus of people praying for him. And then he got help at the most opportune time in his life, where then Judith goes to a priest seeking help, seeking someone to step in and fill in the gap for her when she can't fill it in for herself. And she was let down. How do you know? Like, in that priest in that moment had an opportune, I would say he had an assignment, and he failed the assignment. He failed the test. And Judith then plummets. So yeah, I have a saying that says, don't be somebody's cherry on top. I've said this for at least 11 years of my life. Don't be the cherry on top. I don't mean that in a good way. Like, don't be the cherry on top. You never know what somebody's going through behind closed doors. You don't know. That could be a stranger. You could be at a checkout line and the person at the cash register is hanging on by a thread, and then you want to get snappy with them because they're taking too long. Give them a smile. Hey, it's okay. Because you're not having a problem, right? The fact that the scanner is not working or whatever, something's not ringing up, you're not having a problem. You don't know how a smile or a kind word can mean to what that can mean to a person. Even if you're just having a bad day and then someone comes in and they do something for you, like, they weren't obligated to do that. Man, like, you don't be the difference between somebody giving up or not. I mean, don't be the difference in a bad way. Be the difference in a good way. You never know. You just never know what people are going through behind closed doors. Man, I was not expecting this to go down this review. But I remember this book clearly. It stuck with me. I would love to reread this. Anyway, Judith Hearne is spiraling into hopeless desperation. And it's just such a sad novel. It's a sad novel. The reader is experiencing somebody hit rock bottom, and it's not fun. This is not a fun book to read. It is grueling. However, at the same time, Moore wrote it in such an authentic way that I was floored by the realism of this book. I think almost everybody in life has had hope deferred. My neighbor's cutting his grass. Oh, man, good for him out here in this pollen. And that pleading, that inner turmoil, and just the years of being patient, and you're like, why? Hope deferred makes the heart sick. It really does. Especially when a person has no one. But this is a simply written book, but it still punches the reader in the gut. It's not dramatized, but it does explore life in a way that there's no sugarcoating. And as much as I did, ironically, this book is about a lack of hope and hope deferred, but I was still hoping for Judith. I know this is a fictional character, but I was hoping for my girl. And I was hoping she would get a break, but I knew she wouldn't. And this is a book where the author does not let the reader have a happy ending. He doesn't let the reader have their way. And he doesn't tie up things neatly. Because in some cases, that's real. That's life. There are things in our lives that we suffer because that's the lot of life. Life has its ebbs and its flows. And there are years sometimes that you ask questions, and then there are years that answer. And sometimes it takes longer than you think it would have taken. It always gets darkest before the dawn, right? Life is funny. Life is funny. Anyway, I gave this book a 4 out of 5. This made me want to reread this book. Don't know if I'm going to reread it this year anytime soon, but I would definitely be keeping it on my shelf. I would like to explore other things that Brian Moore has read because this book has left such an impression on me. Anyway, have you read The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne? Have you watched It's a Wonderful Life? I would say read Judith Hearne and then go watch It's a Wonderful Life, because It's a Wonderful Life, phenomenal. Phenomenal book. Phenomenal book, especially if you're a person who has ever experienced seasons of life where you don't understand why you're suffering. But then sometimes it's those few people in your life who lift you up and it carries you into a different season. I'm telling you, read this book, but then go watch It's a Wonderful Life, because you're going to need to cleanse the palate. Anyway, and it's also two different takes on faith and what happens when you have people who step up to the assignment versus people who don't. There you go. There you go. I switched dialects there. My bad. Please feel free to leave me a comment about this book. Have you read it? Have you not even heard of it? Also, please free to tongue twister. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I said that already about leaving me a comment. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more book shenanigans. I post all of my book content there first, as well as goofy things in the Instagram stories. So with that, I'm going to sign out because I talked about this book way longer than I had anticipated. All right, I'm done. Bye.